Tuesday, May 23rd, 2017. Trustee Spilsbury and Trustee Smith are not able to join us today. We respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. We do have the adoption of the agenda before you. The addendum packages are just a larger script than that's provided earlier. Nothing new there. Any other changes or additions to the agenda? Trustee Thorne? No.
Yeah, moving.
Trustee DeGood, second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, don't even look.
You didn't look. That's on video.
I did watch. Minutes of April 25th. Trustee Dolman, you raised your hand there? No. No.
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee DeGroot.
Seconded.
Trustee Croft, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Action list. Are you responding to this action list? Any questions? Staff, the action list. You're asking a question?
No, just responding that one of the items on the action list is on the agenda.
For today, right?
Oh.
The second item will be appearing on the agenda under policy.
Okay, moving on to petitions and delegations. There are none. Education framework for student learning.
Okay. So just going to kind of bring you up to speed as to where we are as a district with our framework for enhancing student learning. And this is sort of a bit of a shift coming from the ministry. We used to have what was called an achievement contract that we had to do each year. It would come to the board for review, and then it would be sent to the ministry for July 15th. And it was, I'm not going to necessarily say it was totally a compliance aspect of things, but pretty much it was pretty much compliance. And so what's happening is there's now a cultural shift regarding accountability from compliance to more of a cross-partner ownership of student learning. So they came up with a framework for enhancing student learning. And so basically from the ministry's point of view is they wanted to come up with some sort of a framework that would build into a district plan that had a system-wide focus on intellectual, human, and social and career development, that it was a multi-year, because they get it, that every year, generally we work on things long-term rather than short-term, so it was should be a multi-year with school and district plans that are updated on a daily basis. So there would be an overall district plan as well as school plans. And it would be very iterative. School would feed into the district would feed into the schools. That another a component of it was that it needed to be meaningful with effective evidence, so evidence-based, which I think is part of our the board's strategic plan as well, for things to be clearly evidence-based. And that evidence was reported on at least annually. Oh, I get to move out of the seat pretty quick. And that it's system-wide, really also looking at the capacity building aspect of things. So that was sort of the top 4 cornerstones from the ministry's point of view, and they had quite a bit of input in terms of developing that, both with BCTF, with principals, with superintendents, with FINESC, with a large, broad range of partner groups, is what existed this particular framework. And so this is just sort of the ministry's guideline, and what their ask is that each district come up with their own framework and timelines for what that's going to look like, and that's going to be on the next page, and that framework. I'll move momentarily.
She's doing great.
So,
and she's on time.
There you go. So basically, we worked. We've had principals. We worked very, very closely with the union with senior staff, with principals, vice principals, with the union, also with CUPE union as well. And so as a smaller sort of subcommittee, this is, or what you see in front of you is what our framework looks like. And so when we started through our framework, big questions were, well, what is it that we value? So we wanted to make sure that when each of the schools and when the district as a whole creates their district and school learning plans, that they include these value pieces, so that we want to make sure that when people read the plans, they can see that we value cultural diversity and perspectives, that we also value individual diversity and perspectives, that the plan is looking at the whole child, that it's inclusive of everyone, that there's a learner voice and agency, and that it's building on strengths of our community and building on strengths of the child, so it's strengths-based rather than deficit-based, and that it includes Aboriginal world views. So those were kind of our starting values. So as each school and as the district goes to work on their district plan or school plans, those values should be embedded in it. In terms of timeline, we looked at a 4-year cycle being updated annually, and that once during the 4-year cycle that we would have a larger appreciative inquiry that would occur at the community level. One of the big aspects of this was the overall partner ownership, so that we have parents as part of it, our Aboriginal community as part of it, our teachers as part of it, our students as part of it. And so each year we would be including all of our partner groups in our creating, but once every 4 years we would have a much larger community forum. Sorry, I talk with my hands.
What does it mean, a larger appreciative requirement?
Just more of a community forum. So inviting, rather than sort of schools and unions groups going out to and sort of that sort of feeding the district plan or school plans, that once a year we would host a larger community forum and invite people to participate through perhaps a World Cafe. We haven't really looked at what exactly that's going to look like, but where we would be inviting all of our stakeholders to a sort of more to an event, so to speak, and have them work through different questions and provide perhaps more in-depth, we would hope, input into where we're at and where we're going. You just giving me time.
Thank you. My apologies for being late. An appreciative inquiry structure is one that really focuses around the kinds of things that are going well, how we can do more of those things, how we can more future-focused kind of an approach. It's a pretty common strategy now out in school districts, and one that allows you to bring a large group of people together with a whole diverse set of voices and perspectives, and yet come to some common ground through an appreciative process, rather than lists of things that aren't going as well as they could, things that are, and you still get to those things, but you do it through a more appreciative kind of an approach.
Trustee Kwan?
Yesterday I had a meeting with a group of kids that are just now aged out from foster care. They gave me a long list of, these are our problems, these are what's irked us for years, this is what we're going through now. I met with some of the Huckabee Treaty Group today who discussed problems for people that are taking like a dual credit and getting registered with Industrial Trades Authority. They get to a point where they're stymied. I met with British Columbia Construction Association, South Island Construction Association, and another foundation who's applied for dollars to work with children aging out of foster care. I did mention to them that we were working on it, and BIU has something in place now, that maybe there should be a conversation coming. But I would love to bring some of these kids to a board meeting one night, and if you hear what they have to say, it's transportation, living accommodations, daycare, and the biggest one is confused. They spend so much time being isolated in foster care, they don't know where to go, who to talk to, and basically the trust issue came up a lot with, I think out of the 15 I talked to last night, 9 of them said they had very little trust issue. So it can be self-defeating, but it's something that we need to kind of to focus on. Now, these were both Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal kids. I didn't just specify one particular group.
Thank you.
So hearing those voices would be integral, right, to creating our school learning plans as well as our district learning plans. You can see on the bottom here that, you know, just evidence is important, and not just numbers, but all kinds of different pieces of evidence. On the next page, we started to go into a little bit into, okay, so what would the cycles look like? Typically in schools, they typically develop and or revise their school plans. I'm just seeing that there's a typo there. Should say develop and revise school plans rather than district plans, and I'm looking at the right-hand side. So they typically look at theirs in the spring, and where so what we're looking at is sort of the cogs up at the top, sort of showing that the district would be looking at writing their plan more in the fall, and the schools would be writing their plans more in the spring, and that the implementation would be the fall right through to the spring, and then they would relook, revise, and then ready for the fall again. The district would be looking at writing looking at theirs in the fall, and then implementing throughout, and then re-looking at it in the fall again. So just kind of that, again, that sort of that iterative cycle where we're both feeding into each other. So that's sort of overall is sort of our framework. We're now moving into the work of, okay, so our district plan, right? So here's the framework, and then now the next piece of work that we're working on is our district plan, and what does that look like?
So if we were to look at a school plan 2 years from now, how would this model be different, or the outcome be different than 2 years before? 2 years ago, so 4 years different. What would you be looking for in terms of key change? So,
I think we'd be looking for one, alignment and coherence between school plans and district plans, so that it's not 20-something school plans going off in a variety of directions, and a district plan that's perhaps irrelevant's too strong a word, but not as linked to the reality in schools. So we're wanting to have those things aligned and coherent, so that it's not this planning process isn't a hoop that schools have to jump through, but actually a meaningful process, so that it makes sense to them, makes sense to their schools, and yet it still links into a broader district-focused plan, so we all kind of know where we're going for alignment of resources, etc. Would be one piece.
And if I can add, I would also say that the audience is much different. Whereas the district plans, the audience was the ministry, now the audience is the community. And whereas the school plans were also their community, but I think it was a smaller community, their immediate community. But now, because our audience have changed, it's much broader now. But I think that that's a big piece, that because it's written for a different audience, a slightly different purpose, that I think that they will look different.
So, because it's a different audience, do you anticipate a greater participation of people in the writing of the plan?
Yes,
Because could
absolutely.
I characterize historic plans as more administrative exercise?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just the work that we've done with the union to date is a huge testimony to this wasn't created without the union's involvement. They were a huge piece of this and contributed largely to the work. So yes, very much, I think that's the other, very much a team effort, for sure.
Trustee Croft.
So if it's evidence-based, are we starting to generate new kinds of evidence, considering that we have a new curriculum and a new process? And can you give me an example? Whoever feels best.
I think we're in early stages of that, as is the ministry, trying to all of us figure out what some of the old evidence isn't going away. Reading, scores, writing, mathematics, those things are all still hugely at play. But it's the other types of evidence, how we're capturing the stories of students, how we're using that to inform our practice. And then trying to find ways to quantify or get that together in a way that's usable. How we think about competencies and our work on competencies. That's still a big provincial question that districts are working through, just like we are, going,
Yes.
We know it's important. We know we want to capture it in meaningful ways that aren't superficial and not just an administrative exercise, but we're really listening to that. Do we know exactly how we're going to do that yet? No. But I think that's part of our learning as we get deeper into the new curriculum. That's the kind of learning that comes along with it. And we do that with our peers across the province. Cheryl and Debbie are going to a meeting on Thursday with all the island districts. Conversation about exactly that. So how are they, or are we all collectively thinking about that kind of evidence?
Sorry, quick follow-up. As we're working on, this is more a comment, if you don't mind, as we're working on the board communication plan, I suspect that would affect what we do with the board communication plan and the flow of information back and forth. Put that on the table there. Thank you.
Trustee Thorne?
What really impresses me is how much, since, allergies, I've been working on yards on weekends, swallowed some grass, swallowed grass.
Okay, you don't want to say that.
Anyway, I see that we talked beginning of the year about changing the direction of education, and this is happening. This is what really impresses me. Knowing that we heard comments and we all agreed that it just seemed like we were grooming kids in high school for trades they'll never be able to do. But I see the change is coming. We're starting to get more and more focused. Talking with all the districts is great. I'm hoping people like Denise Augustine can be attended because she carries a lot of dreams from a lot of people. I see good changes coming. I really want to. Wow. I really want to work more with the unis because that's, to me, one of the problems that get in the way, especially when you start talking about dual credit where people are doing academic and they're learning a trade. Unions can make or break somebody's career. And again, what I heard yesterday and what I heard again today was we've got people who've been involved for a couple of 3 years, but they can't get to that next door because they're having problems with unions. And those are kinds of things I think we need to focus, I want to focus on. And I'm really proud of this board because we put a lot of time and effort into changing. And our teachers, our schools, our principals, everybody's pulled together. I'm really happy. This is the first time I can actually say I'm really, really happy that we are changing. You know, as long as we have a clause we can review like once a year, once every 6 months, to make sure that we can refresh if there's something that isn't working, fix it before it damages us a lot.
Michelle?
Just maybe further to that, and again, apologies for being late, but Denise and I were just up in a meeting at VIU with MasterCard Foundation, discussing exactly this as this ladders into the post-secondary world. How can we make sure that our planning is aligned with the experiences for our kids are aligned and coherent and move in this common direction? So and there's some exciting opportunities coming through that relationship for this valley in terms of opportunities for all kids, but especially for Aboriginal First Nations kids. That all lines up with evidence and planning that's not superficial, but planning that's actually linked to life chances of kids. So it's pretty exciting.
You want to lead us?
Yes, I'm happy to.
Oh, you didn't have to.
I think
I know, just.
Did you get fired?
I did.
Have to move on and jump.
Okay, business and operations portable. Moves. Page 10 of your agenda.
Thank you. We've invited Lonnie Schermerhorn here today, who's been analyzing the district's portable requirements for next September based on the information that we know today. And he's put together this summary, which I'll let him go through here. So Lonnie, if you want to
Well,
this off.
firstly, I think I need to say that we have scoured the district and we're essentially using every single portable classroom that we have available to us to respond to requirements of Bill 28. And what you're seeing here simply reflects where our portables, the ones that are moving, currently are located and where they're moving to. So we have 3 portables that we recognized that they were in exceptional condition. We wanted them to stay that way, not to be vandalized or to deteriorate. We moved them to the back of our bus compound where they're secure and kept them in reserve for enrollment pressures, etc. And now we have those pressures. So we're going to be pulling all 3 of those out, and they'll be going to sites around the district. You may be aware that there is a portable at Charles Hoey. Doesn't look like much at the moment, but it actually is a really sound good portable. All of these portables will be refurbished as part of the moving process. And where we have, for example, we'll be moving multiple portables onto a single site, we'll be painting the portables so that they have a consistent look. Any portables we're moving on to elementary school sites, we're going to be constructing washrooms in those portables and connecting them to the services that are available in the area that we're going to be locating them. Where we have, actually there's only one site in the district now where we have multiple portables, and that's Francis Kelsey. We're going to be borrowing a couple of those, simply because we have no option. We need to move them to places where we're going to have pressures as a result of Bill 28. There are 2 portables that have been sitting more or less vacant at Chematus Elementary. We have some other school sites across the district where there have been vacant portables that have been sitting there waiting for a purpose. Well, that purpose has arrived, and we'll be pulling those portables out. So the bottom line is the 3 modular full-day kindergarten classrooms at Mill Bay will be leaving the site, and over and above that we have 10 portable classrooms which will be crisscrossing the district to where they will eventually land. It was kind of like taking a partial deck of cards and shuffling it, and anyway, we found a way to make it work. There's multiple restrictions on how and where you can move a portable, because they're not all exactly the same. Some of them, the truck tows from one end, some of it tows from the other end. Configuration of the entrance and exit doors, sometimes they're on the end, sometimes they're on the side. Which direction windows face, what kind of fuel. Anyway, we've made it work. We've had to juggle it a few times to get this scenario, and hopefully it doesn't change anyway. We don't have the final staffing numbers for secondary, so we've got our fingers crossed that we've done what we need to do at this point. I've got building permit applications underway. I'll be meeting with the portable mover tomorrow morning at 7:30, and we'll be touring the district for his final go-ahead, his final approval that what we assume that we can do, he can do for us. We'll be using a combination of contracted work, that is the moving of the portables and the setup and the ground anchors, and our forces will be responsible for bringing in fire alarm, intruder alarm, power, water, sewer, all the services that require, and interior, as I said, constructing washrooms, skirting, stairs and ramps, things of that nature. And that is sort of the Coles Notes version of what we've been up to. Part and parcel of this is just the portables element of responding to Bill 28. We're making several renovations and alterations within our school buildings as well, to refurbish spaces and reclaim classrooms, and to relocate programs within schools that have just sort of drifted to where they now exist over time because we've had surplus space. And the message at the end of the day is I think district-wide, we will have 3 surplus classrooms after this is done. So our long-range facilities plan has been accelerated, I think, about 3 to 4 years just by this one move.
Thank you, Lonnie. Just the number that you've submitted for, or staff submitted for April 28th, I think it was April 28th to the province, is this very similar to it, and have we actually received funding for that?
The funding announcement happened on Friday, late Friday, and we'll have information for the board at the next board meeting. It's not 100% what was applied for. We applied for $1,492,000, and what was received is $1,456,000. Some slight changes on the drink water scope as far as what the ministry would support around some of the planning around room swaps. There may be a opportunity, it sounds like there's going to be an opportunity for a second submission if it isn't enough, or and they're also going to release 75% of it at the beginning. So the boards are now in a position to begin the work and to support these moves and to pay for all these moves and all of the refurbishing. That was all part of the submission, although it has changed slightly. Some of the, originally one of the modulars was going to go onto the site at Drinkwater, but it wouldn't fit with adding 3 portables, so it will now move over to Quamachin, which may have some economies of scale because 2 other modulars are moving to that site. So there will, it still has some dynamic elements certainly to it, but interesting that the capital announcement arrived before the classroom teacher announcement, because they are linked. You know, the number of teachers that they're going to support funding for does drive this part of the puzzle. So we have to just keep working in the absence of that actual final staffing announcement, which is what we've included here in the package as well as the next agenda item.
Well, what I heard you say is that we got 96% of the funding we asked for, or within 4%.
Yeah.
Is that not a good news story?
It's great news. And we'll have that more of the reconciliation for you at the open board meeting in June.
We can only access 75% of it. To start.
Currently.
Just currently. But that 13 portables are fully covered, but not 96% covered.
Fully covered. It's a renovation within one of the schools that we were going to do some room swapping, which is not material on the scope of the range of work. Now, Lonnie will also likely need to bring a revision to the annual facilities grant plan, because this work will now occur over the summer, which may shift some of the planning around how that grant was going to be spent, and around certainly the summer months are the ideal months for some of the major projects. Roofing, painting, dry, schools are empty. Some of that work may need to change and shift a little bit, so we're expecting to see some revisions to that plan that the board saw earlier, because it will shift the work plan.
Trustee Thorne and then Trustee Green.
This is all good, but I know that we had talked about asking for 13 more teachers as opposed to the number of 50, I think it was, that they were going to allow us. So this could actually, second submission could actually make a good increase for getting a bit more money.
This reconciles with the final submission that was submitted a week after the capital, because again we had to put the capital in before we put in the teacher submission, and we'll show you that on the next agenda item how that reconciled on a school by school basis.
Trustee Green.
So long term, we're actually hoping we don't have to move these ever again? Is that what we're kind of hoping, or at least for 5 years?
Well, portable classrooms by nature are meant to be portable. So 10 of these are, it's not just a matter of hooking up and driving away, but it's not much more complicated than that.
The 3 from Mill Bay,
The
or
3 modulars, we generally would not want to move those unless we know we're going to stay in one place for a minimum of 10 years. It's a bigger investment to move them.
The composition impact will change year to year. So it's very possible that there could be a capital request next year to move another one of these portables to another site where just the way the students have landed in a particular grade or composition requires a little more space. And it'll always be dynamic.
Trustee Cronin.
Earlier on, there was some concern in recovering classroom space, that there'd be some loss of music rooms or art rooms. Did we have to give any of that up?
All of it.
Good job.
The district, as Lonnie mentioned, went from having capacity to very, very little capacity anticipated for September in, in one year.
So where does music happen now? At regular classroom?
And it will vary school by school, but in many cases it will be an itinerant kind of a role as opposed to a dedicated space. But those are the kinds of decisions the schools will be looking at as they sort of fine tune exactly how they're going to precisely configure. But there'll be lots of itinerant.
Yeah, there's still some school-based decision making to happen with this.
The portables coming from Sheminas, is there still room for the Sheminas Society, I believe, was moving out of the inside of the building to a portable? Is that?
Sheminas Community School.
Yes, right.
I think that one right now is tenuous at best. There's space for them. It looks like as of this morning we need to reclaim that portable. But I think we might have another opportunity to provide them some space elsewhere in the community. So they're not sort of being evicted, but might have to move. We might need a challenge.
It will be challenging.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions on this matter for staff? Thank you very much for your wonderful work.
You want
Passion Enhancement Fund.
Thank you. Just wanted to review with the committee what the submission looked like. This isn't the submission, this is a summary of the submission, and we put it on your desktop so you can sort of get an idea of the changes that are coming. So based on the best information that we had at the time, and it changes every time a student is identified with a designation that may impact composition every time a student leaves the district, comes to the district, this is in flux. So the first thing I wanted to show you was an example of the elementary school form. So it's probably the second one underneath of the larger sheets here, and you'll see that it says Sheminas Elementary on the top if you open up the big 11 by 17. That's the package we want to look at. So we can just start by looking at Sheminas Elementary here. This is the way we were required to report out on the number of teachers that we would need at that school. And I'll show you how this works out. The first part of this form, we have to do this for every single school, class by class basis. The first part of this form is to identify the maximum class size in each grade. So we've done that under the second column, which goes beside the grades, and then we have to identify the maximum class size in a split, and we've done that as well. So that's sort of the first part. The second part doesn't really comply with our local collective agreement language around class size and composition, but we know that if we can have a total of 3 high maxes and a total of 2 low incident maximum in the classroom, so we plug those numbers in, but we did send the specifics of our collective agreement language to clarify that. Then we have to put in the number of classes that we require under the new target. So that's where you see number of classes. Then we have to put in the number of students in each one of those grade cycles. So in this case,
Can you tell me what the word you're referring to as target?
target is complying with the classroom enhancement fund language. So target is complying with the older collective agreement language. So the target column, number 8.
So
That's
those
how many
there'll be
teach-
60 different targets across the province.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's us. That's how many staff we need to hit that target. So in the case of Sheminas Elementary and K, there were a total of 36 students in 2 full-time K classes. You can see that under the target, 2.16. The 0.08 on each one of those 1.0s is for prep time, and prep time on the prep time. So each teacher is actually 1.08. Then you see the number of teachers hired through the block under number 9. So if we didn't have the old language, we only would have needed 1 K class. So The number of teachers required to be hired through the Classroom Enhancement Fund in that case is 1.08. So there's positives and negatives on this sheet. Because to go down to K1, under the target, the classroom enhancement, there would be a K1 at Chemina. So it would have had 2 full-time Ks and 1 K1 under what we need now. Under the old language, there would have been 2 K1 splits to make that work, that school work. So it's a negative 1.08. So really it's the bottom line on the bottom of column 10 that we're asking for. But we had to do all of this language in here to show them the average class size, number of students with designations, number of classes and potential remedy. And then they take this and they roll it up for our district. So it's a very complex reporting way to get to, we need 4 teachers. But they wanted to know. So we did this on a school by school basis. It rolls up into this first sheet. There's 2 of these because this template that the ministry provided wasn't sufficient to cover all of our sites. So they asked us to fill in 2 different templates. So if we come back to this sheet here that you have on your desktops, this is the one where we're showing you all the different schools. And you look at the thank you, perfect. And you look at the elementary under column C here, where it says a total of 33.48. If I point to this sheet here.
What does block stand for and CEF stand for?
The block would be the amount that we would have needed. This is their language. The block is the number of teachers that we would have needed had nothing changed. The target is the number of teachers we need now that we have class size and composition in the language restored to the teachers collective agreement. So there's a shift there of 33.48 teachers. The ministry are using a rounding formula. You see 33 FTE on this sheet here on the front. I've got that. Just trying to show you how this template works. So I'm trying to show you where each one of those schools have additional staff coming in and how it translates into our submission to the ministry. There's a total of 32 potential remedies through elementary. So that is taking the class sizes as low, which is per 22D of the Memorandum of Agreement, as physically possible within that agreement, and there's still going to be remedies in those classrooms. Okay. Then there's a non-enrolling section, which is the next sheet behind this one, which Gina has there, which is to look at it on each of our different ratios. And it's really the number 4 on the far left-hand side is the number of FTE that are being hired through SEP. So for teacher librarians, the district would have hired under the block funding, under the previous formula that was in place this year, 9.9 librarians, required to have 13.7. So that's 3.8 librarians coming in through the Classroom Enhancement Fund. So if that makes sense as you work across that column 4. Teacher counselors, 0.8 coming in through the fund. Now the other ones all go together. The learning assistants, special ed, and ESL, they're grouped together. There's a surplus there of 16, approximately 6, again rounded by the ministry, approximately 16 FTE. So in the area of special ed, the district's able to count additional services for anybody who has contact, such as speech language, hospital homebound, those other itinerant type of services. They count for the purposes of meeting the ratio. So the district has exceeded the ratio by 16 FTE and been able to maintain the resource teachers that were ratios that were there this year, but also had more in the that qualifies for meeting the ratio requirement. So back.
This is the documentation you haven't heard back from.
Have not heard back from them. So back to the Gina rolls up one page again. Sorry, the other. Yes, there's 5 non-enrolling teachers there. You see that far right as you can go. Correct. So that's the elementary sheet. And if you look at, again, I'm bringing you back to this one because this really helps show the whole summary. I've shown you that there are 33.48 under column C, subtotal elementary. I've shown you that number, Gina's got it. And just below that, there's 4.8 under the non-enrolling piece. So in that first submission, number one, because they made us split it into two, there's approximately 38 FTE, the 33 plus the 5. And there's 32 remedies, full class remedies, anticipated. Okay, so the next part is to look at the secondary, which you see there, all the different schools. And we had to, I've got Francis Kelsey here for you to have a look at. We realized that by going down to the actual floor of the school and staffing it under a 1:24 ratio, which is the 30 maximum less the 6 that you need to go down before you've done your best efforts to be in compliance, that we still had remedies in every one of the secondary schools just due to the composition. So in the case of Francis Kelsey, we'd be asking for 10.038 teachers, because their starting point, if we were to staff on the ratio that we did this year, was using a higher student educator ratio than the other secondary schools because of their self-paced model. So they have the biggest range on as a percentage of staffing increase and still have remedies. There's 48 remedies there. Now those are 48 classes in remedy, which really is you divide by
48
divided by 8 and you get 6, what would be the equivalent of the elementary remedies, because that's anticipated. So the timetables haven't been built yet, but that's just what our best work was on figuring out the remedies in the secondary. So when we go through all that, we end up with 25, sorry, I keep bringing you back to this other sheet here. We end up with 25 teachers and 152 classes in remedy at the secondary level anticipated. And so the total district submission, the bottom line, almost 63 FTE with 148 remedies, which is a blend of between the elementary and the secondary system. So I have not heard back from this, but this is the work that drove the capital work that Lonnie worked on, and the capital has been announced, but this piece has not. I don't know how they're going to go through this on a school-by-school basis and even understand what we've, to be honest, what we've submitted other than the summaries.
As you see, some of the columns don't even make sense for us because of our collective agreement, so we sort of put a summary of the clauses of our local collective agreement on there, for hopefully that makes it clear to them why we have some of these numbers in place, and they're doing that times 60.
We had fantastic backup documents on the elementary because we were able to build this or demonstrate what this class is. We have BearGar software will do a classroom build for us based on the old language. So we were very easily able to show them the block plan, the most efficient staffing we could have done under the block or under the old class size language gets generated by this computer program. So we were able to show them that. We were able to then show them each school on a grade by grade basis with where those students landed in each one of the classes as we knew it a couple weeks ago. It's already changing. So the elementary is very, very well backed up, but the secondary, until they actually start building the timetable to know whether we've got the right ask in, is very difficult. So all we knew is that 1:24, we still had remedies in school, so that had to be best effort under the 22D clause of the memorandum of agreement.
So when do we hope to have an answer on the
They haven't said a thing.
We all sit and wait.
So are we able to be proactive in terms of advertising?
Yes, and we're building timetables. We're moving ahead. We can't continue to wait because best efforts take us to the floor of 24. We think we're pretty safe building on 24, unless something radically crazy changes. We should be pretty safe.
Trustee Croft?
What do we do to reach out to families that are new to the area and coax them into registering before the first day of school?
We have a
We do
communications
something.
person.
Oh, but wait, we do.
Yes.
You're right.
Continue to reach out
Yeah.
and request that. Often that falls on deaf ears, but we will redouble our efforts to say, yeah, it helps us a lot if you tell us you're here, especially if those students have needs, especially because the September surprises are even more challenging to manage this year.
So with Remedy, the request is approximately $6.8 million for those 63 teachers plus the calculated remedies.
Sweet.
We wait, and it will be revised. This is the ask now. The ministry has indicated this will be an ongoing process throughout the year as remedies are identified and have to be funded. This is the best work 2 weeks ago that was submitted. It will be constantly need to be monitored and assessed and tracked. Now, what I did appreciate about the submission is we were asked to submit on our average teacher salary. And I thought that was a real positive, rather than having instructions that we would need to be submitting on the value of the new teacher hires. So that should actually, the funding, I think, should be sufficient, because we are going to hire new teachers, and that should help back up some of that average teacher salary drop that we put in the operating budget to help balance it, because it'll be shifted across the two funds now.
Any other questions of staff? So we'll wait in anticipation for the good news. Policy 6510. Who is speaking for this?
I think this came on, Mr. Chair, from advisory. Came onto this. There were some questions about it at advisory, I understand.
Yeah, well, actually, Chris from the Teachers Federation brought it up and noted that there was an annual review built in, a training section built in, and we hadn't done anything. So how can we approach this and make sure that our teachers have the information that they need to implement the policy, and get that on the go.
We, in the August admin meeting, this last August, went through this policy with all our principals and vice principals, along with several others that were required to bring to their annual attention. It was to be on the first staff meeting of the year, in that first package of staff meetings that happened in early September. To bring it to staff's attention and reminders, because some of these things are district, some of them are kind of school-based, how they're managing it in a specific school, to have that conversation with each of their staffs. So that's one piece. In terms of the review, perhaps rightly or wrongly, I took that conversation with principals and vice principals as the review for last year, or for this year. It doesn't stipulate whether that's bringing a team together or just reviewing the processes or bringing it to the board, but would certainly be happy to have your counsel on that.
I should have mentioned in the update that Rod wasn't available to give a response at the advisory meeting, so we didn't actually have the information, so thank you. And I wasn't here during the creation of the policy, but there are people that are. But as I read it, it was really up to the superintendent and perhaps the board as we go along as to how those reviews and so on, the annual look at it would be carried out. So unless we want to have that conversation now, I don't know if the board has had a chance to think about what they'd like to do in terms of contributing in terms of thoughts on an annual review.
What is our policy on policy review? I know we see
Well, I know this one has an annual review
This
built
one-
into it, but I don't think they all do, as I read them.
This is uncommon to have this annual review process built in.
And I think it's a certain special nature of who we're serving.
Correct.
Trustee Crafty, sorry, Trustee Degree?
Well, I'm just looking at it, administrative procedures annually, that would be reviewing this policy, I would think, as you did, with the staff, so that it's done. Because one of the things that we were concerned about is that people weren't aware, right? So if you are making the administration and the schools aware, then it forces them to make sure their staffs are aware as well.
Trustee Croft, on page 2 of the policy number 3A, I thought there was a concern expressed. It reads, the district will encourage all staff to participate in learning opportunities regarding LGBTQ issues. But there wasn't the leadership from the district to provide those opportunities. As an issue.
That,
Is it correct?
yes, that was what was voiced. And so, so from what I'm hearing today and in the meeting is that perhaps there's a disconnect between where it gets to administration and where it gets into the hands of the teachers. And also age-appropriate material so that people feel comfortable working with all different ages of kids. So I don't know if there's something we can do. Yeah.
Mr. Al?
Yeah, certainly. We, several of us attended a session here in town 2 months ago, maybe, put on by the ministry about, and part of that session was about what are the age-appropriate materials, what's out there. There were some videos and various things that we've attempted to get our hands on from that session because they were new and quite excellent. But we have yet to receive those. Certainly I do know that the resource center has been reviewing some materials and looking at materials to again doing sort of survey to see what's out there. Because we already do have, it's not like we have nothing, we have lots of stuff. It's just we always want to be updating and making sure that we have the right blend of materials for a variety of ages. But we did not, as a district this year, put on a workshop on LGBTQ. We didn't put on a workshop this year. We have in the past, we did not this year.
Trustee DeRoot?
I think one of the other things that it was the student brought this up is that the restrooms and change rooms and having gender neutral and where possible, and I don't think they were aware that there was any in the place where they did.
I'm not sure which school, but we have been going through a process. Easier in some schools than others and faster in some schools than others. Cheryl's trying to give me some code over there.
I think that I'm just here in Seabolt, so I'm not positive on
They were
Seabolt.
from Seabolt.
But I was going to say every school, and I know you probably know that, because a lot of our schools have a handicap washroom, which is a single stall, and that's just been changed to a,
Everybody.
yeah.
Washroom.
Everybody washroom.
Yeah.
Exactly,
With
yeah.
a possible exception of Seabolt.
Yes.
They were from Seabolt.
I think Seabolt doesn't have one yet, right? That's what I
Could-
understand.
that could be the exception to the
Yes,
rule so
yeah.
far. 22 good,
Yeah.
one bad. But we'll certainly look at that.
Trustee Cobb?
And I'll just, if I could just relate to you, and that is that the DSAC specifically said that they had a student who felt quite badly because I'm sorry, I don't know who it was, but was criticized for using they as a pronoun instead of him or her. And the student felt that you should be able to use a non-gendered pronoun. And of course, and I found out, I thought you couldn't use a non-gendered pronoun in English, but apparently you can. That's changing.
This was a student in an assignment or something.
Yeah,
in a-
yeah, yeah.
And
So
that would be part of the teacher awareness and making sure that teachers.
that's right.
are-
So
Yeah.
so some teachers like that, and you weren't there to hear that, so I just thought I'd share that.
Thank you.
It was very
I
important
appreciate
to
that.
them. Yeah, it was important.
Mhm.
Thank you. Anything else on that, Trustee Cobb? Moving on to policy section. And Trustee Schmidt is not here to speak to these, but are these both coming from your one?
The second one is
And the first one is,
superintendent will.
I can speak to the first
Yes.
one, the communicating student learning, student progress. As you know, the ministry brought in an interim reporting order last year, or early this year, in September or so, and asked districts to update their policies to reflect that order. We have done that, we hope. Tried to make it match both the ministry reporting order and be aligned with that, as well as our new format and template that we're using for policies. So there will be behind this some regulation, sort of administrative procedures, but the policy piece we are bringing forward to you.
So is the 5 reports per year a change from history?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
So, if I may,
You can.
it was, in the past, it was 3 formal and 2 informal, which adds up to 5. So what they're saying now is that the ministry is really encouraging ongoing communication throughout the year and not just kind of term 1, term 2, term 3. And so they're sort of moving it to a minimum of 5. So in your ongoing reporting, communicating to parents, 5 would be a minimum, with a learning summary being at the very end.
Or would all 5 be standardized, like all teachers would be sending out the same information?
No.
Same document, but there'll be still 3 that are standard or not?
Not necessarily. That would be with our regulations of, we have a Form A and a Form B right now. We have two options, sort of optional streams, I guess, of how teachers can do it. Some look very much like you would expect, and others are based using Fresh Grade or our own district product, where there's a more ongoing communication with parents. Kelsey would be a prime example of that, where they've been using that for a couple of years, where they're making a bit less of a distinction between formal and informal. It's just ongoing reporting, and yes, there is still, you need something formal at the end. Nothing's changed there. That's sort of is this a formal or an informal report? What does it count as? The ministry said we don't really want to engage in that conversation.
Trustee DeGood?
So that could be online reporting, it doesn't have, or what about telephone?
Could be. Again, and trying to, we've been working hard with parents to sort of, they need to be as in charge of that as they can. If they're okay with one of those reporting, one of those 5 touches to be over the phone, excellent. If they're not and they'd like 5 face-to-face, that's fine too. It kind of depends on how the parents want that.
Trustee Croft?
I'm really happy to hear about defining the 5 touch points, because we have been hearing from some parents that they just were not connecting with the teachers, so I think to have those, and it's something that parents can hang on to in the midst of change. So I appreciate that, and I think it's interesting what you said, and that if we don't have standardized processes, now it's up to the teacher and the parent to navigate and select their media preferences. So that's sort of a whole new process for them.
And that does work 2 ways.
Yes.
Both. So a teacher might feel very uncomfortable using a fairly technological interface, and they should have that. And if a parent might say, I only want to be contacted by email and Skype, I don't know. So that's a good conversation to be having, teachers and parents. How do I inform you on an ongoing basis how your child's doing? How do we have this conversation?
Okay, so staff, do you need a recommendation to the board from this committee then on this one?
Please.
So could somebody move that we recommend that policy 3730 be adopted by the Board of Education? Trustee DeGood, Trustee Doman, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Contingency reserve. I think you moved this one. Mrs. Nicholas, did you want to
Thank you.
speak first?
Yes, boards have been hearing best practice recommendations from the Ministry of Education for the last couple of years. More recently from recent Auditor General's report on school district governance, and particularly in light of a couple of districts who have had recent deficits. We're hearing more and more from the ministry about having an appropriate level of contingency reserve available for unknowns. This board has talked about that in the budget that was prepared for the current year, not next year's, but the current year that we're in. a contingency reserve was held. So we ended up with funds of approximately $994,000, which we would consider our contingency reserve for this year. Now, some of that was used into next year. We anticipate the contingency reserve being around $800,000. So the audit committee, which has Trustee Doman and chaired by Trustee Schmidt, met last week, and we looked at policy around a contingency reserve policy to formalize how a contingency would be accessed or established, and followed this policy along with one of the ones that the ministry recommended as sort of their standard, which was out of Maple Ridge. So we looked at Maple Ridge's policy, reviewed it, and the committee is we're moving it forward to the BEBC for review.
Any questions, Mr. Singles? Trustee Crum?
So is this driven by legislation?
No, it is optional.
Okay.
Best practices.
So we have quite a long list here, and I'm wondering, do we need any further wiggle room on that? I mean, do you need a clause that says
And other possible.
other possibilities, so desired
As
by the
determined
board,
by
blah,
the
blah, blah?
board?
Yeah, as determined. And the other question I had, extraordinary unknown utilities costs. I was thinking maybe we meant unforeseen, because in end analysis, we always know what's on the bill, right?
Sure.
Thank you.
Cold winters.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause you don't have air conditioning.
So you recommending adding another bullet, the board may approve the contingency reserve under the following circumstances, and the other bullet, last bullet would be other circumstances as determined by the board.
Yeah.
Mr. Allen, I can see you want to say something on that matter.
I'm wondering, as I nudge out of my area of expertise, if some of the reasons for this coming up in best practices was through the actions of another district that perhaps did some things with their reserve
Correct.
that was less than appropriate. Who probably would have found a way to put that. So I think that's why there is a bit more of a definitive list than, or anything else the board wants to do with it. Which might be the out,
Little too
actually,
broad, too
it
broad.
might be a little bit too, well, that would be my,
I don't know what the conversations were at the meetings on.
But the board could at some future date change this list as needed, but that's a public process to do that. To leave it open-ended, really, why have a list at all?
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Does that
Question
mean,
two?
does that have me?
Yes,
Oh.
sorry.
Does that mean we're taking that last bullet off then?
Hasn't been seconded.
Okay, that means okay.
Just putting it out there for conversation.
So can you, the third bullet from the bottom, you talked about utilities, what did you want to change to?
Well, extraordinary, unknown, I was gonna change that, request unforeseen. Saying we always know what the utilities bill is, it's never necessarily unknown, but it's not unanticipated. That would be my suggestion.
Is it right for foreseeing?
It was unpredicted, so unforeseen, we do budget
We always know.
budget based on our best projections, so.
unanticipated or.
Unanticipated,
Yeah.
because
They're pretty
we
similar.
always know what the final bill
To
is.
me, they mean similar,
Yeah.
similar context. I would,
But shouldn't we get rid of the word pressure then? So it's just extraordinary, unforeseen utility costs. Not pressure, it's just period costs. And the cost is,
Yeah.
the pressure point, I believe, defines that it's over budget to me. And I think a cost pressure, that's something beyond the normally budgeted expenditure.
okay. So what, you're changing a no into what?
I think unanticipated.
Okay, unanticipated school, yeah.
Anybody have any objections to changing the word unknown to anticipated?
I kind of like it the way it is because it pretty much is, there it is, unknown. It's very simple.
It's just, we always know what the bill is because it always arrives, so whatever you guys decide, I'm cool with it.
It's
Trustee
not what the bill is, it's that fact that you budgeted for this, and the bill comes in
And it's a
more,
surprise, it was unforeseen.
and, or unknown. It's a cost pressure that was not.
Let's leave it with unknown then, if that's committee's preference.
We don't even need a word there, it's extraordinary utilities cost
There we
pressure.
go,
Good
there,
idea.
all right.
That's even better.
There we go.
Less than spread.
Simple.
It's settled, it's settled.
Okay. With that changed, is there a mover for that motion to vote? Trustee Gilman, trustee DeGroot, moving and seconding that recommendation to the board that policy 1600 contingency reserve be adopted. Want to speak to that, Mr. Tillman?
It's just something that just makes sense to do all this, for now and for future boards.
What we haven't discussed is there a penalty if we fail to meet the 1%?
There's another clause in the policy which talks about restoration if, over the period of 2 years if we,
Oh, that, okay.
yeah.
Okay, call on the question as moved. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Any other business? Mr. Sinclair?
No,
Mr. Allen, any other business? Motion to adjourn. Trustee DeGroot? Trustee Thorne? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you much, everybody.
I really like